In this episode, we delve into the crucial role of project management offices, or PMOs, in today's dynamic business landscape. Eileen explores how PMOs enhance project delivery by emphasizing benefits realization and tailored strategies for each organization. We address optimism bias, with PMOs acting as champions of professional judgment and evidence-based decision-making. Our discussion extends to integrated PMO models in government, examining recent project failures and the imperative of senior management support. Eileen highlights the rise of PMO directors at board level, underscoring their significance in strategic prioritisation and resource allocation. Join us as we navigate the intricacies of contemporary project management. Welcome to this episode of Implementing Best Practice in Business. We are here to help you and your organisation understand and implement global best practice to help you face the business challenges of today. Join me, Richard Pharro, CEO of APMG International, in talking to leaders and practitioners who have applied these frameworks and practices to boost their productivity. They're here, willing to share their knowledge and experience to help you learn from them so you can do the same to make you more competitive in today's market. My guest today is Eileen Roden. Eileen worked in IT, project management and HR before moving into a practicing PMO role that led her into training and consultancy. She's worked with clients ranging from SMEs and councils to large multinationals. Together with her business partner Lindsay Scott, Eileen established the PMO Flash Mob and led the development of the PMO competency framework before establishing the first professional body for PMOs, the House of PMO. As well as being the lead author for the PMO competency framework, she's the lead author for P30, Best Management Practice, Chief Examiner for the House of PMO, on all of the qualifications ranging from essentials through to directors. Eileen's committed to helping organisations understand how PMOs can support, indeed drive, successful project delivery. But her real passion is helping people, helping individuals understand what a great place the PMO is to work, and working with them to develop their required knowledge and skills, and leading on to that to be truly competent at what they do. If any single person is responsible for putting PMOs on the map, it is Eileen, and she tells me she has a tattoo to prove it. Welcome, Eileen.
I have, it's there.
Excellent. Thank you. Eileen, I've read a lot lately about people saying we're moving towards the project economy. And Tony Rodriguez has actually put a lot out about it. He's written a book on it and what have you. If we are really in a project economy, how would a PMO improve success in that world?
So I think the fundamental purpose of a PMO is to help organisations deliver projects and programmes with less energy and less adrenaline. And when I say that kind of successful delivery, it's not just the delivery of the projects and the outputs, but it's actually right through to kind of benefits realisation as well. And really, there's so much the PMO can do, which I think is fundamental to some of the problems, because it can do anything from kind of doing some admin around kind of taking notes and action chasing, through to writing standards and methods and providing templates for kind of programs and projects, right up to developing and facilitating resource management processes for across the whole organisation. So it can do lots of things. And the real challenge is managing people's expectations and understanding what is going to make a difference in each individual situation that the PMO is in. So if there's a PMO established for a particular programme, then consistency across the programme, focus on benefits delivery might be its primary focus. If it's at portfolio level, it may be actually the prioritisation of projects, which is a really challenging thing for senior managers to get their head around, because they no longer, however senior they are in the organisation, can't just decide on what projects they want. They have to go through a prioritisation progress, recognising that there are some unpalatable truths, like, the project you want to do, Richard, actually doesn't add as much value to the organisation and the strategy as to perhaps one that Sarah does or Phil does. So actually, we would recommend that actually it kind of goes to the bottom of the list. And I think the important thing is as well just to recognise it's not the PMO who make the decisions. It's actually about kind of providing that information to the decision makers so they can make timely, more evidence-based decisions for their organisation.
So there's a lot spoken about optimism bias, particularly on people when they're putting forward their projects and, this is why you need to do my project and this is the business case. Is the PMO a place where people are expected to provide professional judgment to drive out that optimism, that bias, to actually make sure that the decision makers are truly understanding what can and cannot be achieved by those projects that are put forward?
So I think there's two elements when we're talking about optimism bias. There are certain things that we can embed in the project delivery process when developing a business case. And the Better Business Cases methodology is great. We can kind of go through some set steps that ensure the right stakeholders have been engaged with. We've got some information that's based on evidence. And I think particularly around business cases, we can question and challenge some of the gut reactions of some of the individuals are putting in that business case. And it becomes really difficult, doesn't it, to be in a position where we can say, it feels right, or I just kind of know it's right. And I think when you're in those situations, we can use this concept of kind of willingness to pay. And we can say, well, we can go ahead, but you have to put your name to that. So the owner of the business case has to put their name to that to say, I'm betting on the fact that this will work. And what the PMO can do over a period of time is help the organisation develop their that professional judgment of the senior managers by saying, Richard, you put your name to that business case because you genuinely thought that would work. We're now kind of 12 months after the project program deliverables have gone live. It hasn't materialized. Can we go back and understand what that case was? Why did you think that it actually would work at the time? Would you make that decision today? Would it be any different? And what would we do next time if we were in this same situation and making a decision about a project? So it's not about the witch hunt, but you have to go back to the person who really felt it would work. You've provided as much evidence as you can to support that, and then you kind of learn from that and develop, as I said, individuals' professional judgment, but also the organisation's professional judgment when applying gut reactions and kind of real kind of business acumen to a situation.
I can remember a conversation with someone who suggested that when a board considers a business case, when a board considers an issue, they should think about assumption management. So instead of looking at what are the risks and what are the costs, start to ask the person putting it forward, what assumptions have you made that have led you to put forward this business case? Have you come across that in your working experience on where people are actually challenging the thinking behind the thinking, if you like, that goes into what led up to your recommendation? Because in my experience, I think every decision I make is right on the day I make it.
Yep.
But the following week it could be totally wrong because things have changed. So yep. I don't beat myself up about something not happening, but was I right at the time? So have you seen organisations sort of get behind the thinking to make sure the assumptions were sound when they're put forward?
I think there's to kind of unpick a little bit of that, because I think there's a kind of a couple of elements. And what you said is decision is right at the time, but would I change my decision a week later, a month later, 6 months later? And when you do that, part of the question is should I have spent more time making the decision in the first place? So could I have known more at the time? So should I, kind of have a different process to getting to the decision making in the first place? Should I, if the evidence was out there, I just didn't find it, could I have spent more time in doing it? And there's another thing in terms of, well, actually the information wasn't available. It's only in retrospect that we understand what the situation was. So I think there's two elements in terms, and that goes back to reflecting on the decisions. But what I have actually done as a PMO person, I've sat through a planning session where I've listened to the project manager and the project team actually doing their planning process. And I've just sat down and noted all of the kind of the sweeping statements they've made that they don't recognize as a sweeping statement. Yes. But as somebody who kind of just doesn't think, well, actually, well, we'll get a DBA. Well, actually, is one going to be available for? Where are you assuming you're going to get that person from? What skills have you assumed that person is going to have? What rate are you assuming that person is become available at? So it's almost kind of quite good sitting by and observing some of these conversations to say, but you've said that. I don't understand how because I would never make that assumption, or I would have more questions than that. So I think as an observer, you can question and challenge. And one of the kind of the big things we say about the PMO, regardless of what level in the organisation you're playing with, is about being that critical friend. Really? Is that honestly the case? Do you think that's going to happen? Has it ever happened before? Do you know the last 6 times we did this, it's never worked? And it's been that kind of critical friend where you can actually kind of challenge. And if they're happy to work ahead with those assumptions, it becomes part of the decision-making process that you reflect on further on down the line to say, was that decision actually correct? I think another role the PMO can often do as well is recognise where you've got conflicting assumptions, where you're trying to kind of do something consistently. And I did work with an organisation who actually had organisation level assumptions, and it said, we're in a business that is in an industry that is under flux at the moment, but rather than every project and programme thinking differently, let's work on this assumption across the piece. As and when that assumption is proven or disproven, we can then, in a structured, in a more kind of focused way, go through then all of the projects and programs and recognize what the impact has been that assumption has been proven or disproven. So we can hold a kind of a central list of assumptions that applies to every project, but we can also start applying, if we review the assumptions across lots of different projects where there's some kind of conflicts and kind of different assumptions being made, and question and challenge where those assumptions are. But I do want to point out here is that from a lot of the assumptions are actually required where we've come to an impasse in a project and we're struggling to proceed because there is a level of uncertainty. And yes, we've got kind of all of the risk management processes around that. An important role of a project or a program sponsor is to provide clear direction. And so it's important to then go and challenge the project sponsor is we don't know whether it's going to be red or blue. So please tell us what assumption we should be working on until that's clarified. Would you like us to go ahead working on the principle it's going to be red, or would you like us to go ahead on the principle it's going to be blue? Because not having any direction means we absolutely have to stop. And I think that's an important role where we tie into not just the project team and the project manager, but actually the sponsor in this piece of work.
And do you find many sponsors that are happy to give such a clear direction?
No. I enjoy, and it's really interesting. It was a few years ago. I did an awful lot of work improving the role of sponsors in organisations. And what I find fascinating is that as PMOs have actually continued to grow, and PMOs are seen to have a direct contribution to the success of projects and programs, and certain PMOs now are accountable or responsible for the project managers within the organisation, there's a danger that the PMO starts seen to be accountable for the success of projects. And I would fundamentally disagree with that and recognise the governance structure that says the senior managers give the sponsor accountability for investing and delivering benefits, who then go down to the project manager and give them the kind of accountability for delivering the outputs that are required in order to deliver them. And the PMO there is a support function, but we're not the decision makers on what projects should be done, kind of whether the project succeeds and how much budget is there, where there is an independent bystander who's got best management practice and is the critical friend to raise questions and challenges to kind of what decisions need to be made and when decisions are need to be made by and by whom.
Eileen, that's fascinating. So let's move into the slight realms of fantasy. In the UK recently, we've heard a lot about some very poor public sector projects. Clearly HS2 comes to mind, some stuff from the MOD comes to mind. So if you're invited as an expert witness to give evidence at a public inquiry, how would you make the argument for an integrated PMO model within government?
Well, you see, I think what we have to recognise is that those public sector projects did have PMOs. So we're already kind of starting, which leads, doesn't it, to kind of some really interesting questions in terms of having a PMO. Why did that PMO not make the difference, and why was it not successful in raising the flag and kind of following the right processes? And I think what we need to recognise is for a PMO to be successful, there's a couple of things I think really need to be in place. Fundamentally, it needs to have active senior management support. Because if the PMO is providing information on which decisions can be made, it is absolutely within the senior manager's remit to say, thanks for that, but no thanks, we're going to make this decision anyway. And so in order to we had this in an organisation where they'd set up a project advisory group. So projects would come through, would go through some recommended challenge, and then the projects advisory group would agree or not agree for that project to proceed. One project came through, the projects advisory group, which was facilitated by the PMO but was chaired by a senior manager, said, we don't think the project is ready to proceed. And another senior manager in the organisation said, yes, but it's going to happen anyway, so we're just going to go ahead with it. Immediately undermining the governance structure that had been set up and was being facilitated by the PMO. So if the PMO provides the information, but decisions are not made using that information, then actually your PMOs, it's going to be kind of, well, what's the point of us being in place? What's the point of us producing the reports if they're not adhered to? And I think the other thing is as well is that if the PMO is putting those processes in place, I can't go to the project manager as the PMO person and say, you must follow this process. There has to be some consequences for not following that process. And it's not the PMO, it's up through that chain of command, back from the project manager, the sponsor, to the senior exec, who's delegated accountability for delivery, who has to say, hold on a minute, we've got some processes that are defined by the organisation, that if we don't follow them, then there are some consequences. And, kind of a simple example would be, if I decided to hand my expenses form in on the back of an envelope rather than filling out the expenses form, finance would say, I'm sorry, we're not paying your expenses. And I could yell and shout about it all I liked, and I still wouldn't get my expenses paid. However, on projects, the project manager in a lot of organisations can do what they want, and there's no consequences to not following the process. So there has to be the right governance structure and active senior management support for the PMO and what it's trying to do in order for that to really contribute to the organisational success. And then the other thing is, you have to then, you're working on the principle that what the PMO has done in terms of processes and procedures are actually effective. And if you don't have the right competence level of the people in the PMOs, they're going to come up with a textbook version of a process that actually doesn't work in the situation, that doesn't have enough kind of pragmatism written into that to actually kind of speed the project up rather than slow the project down.
So, putting all that together, the person running the PMO needs to be quite experienced. They need to be a very competent person, able to challenge, willing to challenge, within a framework of a clear governance structure where they have clear roles and responsibilities, as does everybody else within the organisation. And when somebody goes outside of those rules, I like your example about finance and accounts and getting your expenses paid, they can independently challenge that to say, this isn't acceptable. You're breaking the rule, and then action should follow.
Yes. And there's more work being done on governance, and I think when we often talk about project governance, we talk about kind of governance of decision making in projects. What we don't always recognise is that the PMO and their processes need to be part of and be seen to be part of that governance structure in terms of this is how we do things in our organisation, this is how we deliver projects, this is how we do reporting. And another kind of classic example of that, which one of the things we identified of all of the things PMOs do, the one thing every PMO does is PMO reporting. And I have turned up, with a project report for senior managers, and they say, sorry, I'm going to use you again as an example, Richard. Richard, I'm sorry, I haven't got any information on Richard's project because you didn't send it in. And they shoot me. And it's hold on, it's not my responsibility to submit information about Richard's projects. It's my responsibility to collate the information I've got and provide some insights and analysis of the information I've given. The person who should be challenged is Richard for not sending his project information in. And so often the organisation gets confused about who's accountable for what. So having a real understanding of kind of the roles and responsibilities of project delivery, and also kind of the oversight of projects. Each project manager has a role to submit that information on a weekly basis. The PMO is not yes, we can collect it, but it's not our job to go and beat you over the head on a kind of daily basis, say, Richard, why haven't you provided it? It's my job to take the information that's there and actually kind of use it to provide insights for senior managers. Though I can provide some insights if you're not providing any information at all, because we can work on some assumptions.
And are there any organisations that are really good at this? Do we have any world-class organisations, world-class PMOs working in that governance structure, that unbiased view, action being taken when people are clearly, when I say outside a process, I mean outside of that governance process, not necessarily at a detailed level. Do we have some world-class organisations, world-class PMOs?
I think it's really interesting. I think it's hard to find a PMO who has that around every single element. But I think there are organisations. So I work with an organisation who has implemented peer reviews on projects, and actions from those peer reviews are escalated to the highest level in the organisation, and the highest level in the organisation are committed and actively chase up those actions where the reviews have kind of highlighted things that need to be addressed in projects. I've worked with organisations who fundamentally hold sponsors accountable for what's on their project. So, part of the PMO reporting says, kind of has the sponsor been through kind of some training and accountability. All of the reporting is got the sponsor's name on it rather than the project manager's name on it, which is, I find you kind of really enlightening. So I think there are pockets of excellence. I know in organisations, we talk about this integrated PMO model, recognising that organisations just have, kind of a PMO here and a PMO there. We're seeing more and more PMO directors who understand the organisation, understand the strategy of the organisation, understand how projects are being delivered. So whether that's waterfall over here, agile over here, kind of scaled agile across the whole organisation, and say, well, actually, if that's how the organisation best is going to deliver projects alongside business as usual, this is the best structure of PMOs that are going to work within this organisation. So we'll have an organisational portfolio office, we'll have 3 hub portfolio officers, 1 programme office and 27 project officers. Now, that more organisations are that role of the PMO director, we're getting a better understanding of how PMOs can help, and a more the PMOs are targeted at specific objectives around the challenges that organization has of delivering projects. So whether that's, improving risk management, improving sponsorship, focus on benefits realization, each PMO has its own specific objective where it contributes to the overall success of the organization rather than just pockets. And certainly what we're starting to see is that PMOs in organizations, so historically we've had PMOs and each PMO has felt quite successful, but then you start saying, but what about that PMO over there? Do you talk to that PMO over there? Do you do the same thing as that PMO over there? And we're starting to see more conversations between PMOs. So they're not quite yet in a kind of a fully hierarchical structure, but they're actually kind of more of a kind of a awareness of each other and working together and a confederation of PMOs, which is the kind of first start to kind of building that integrated PMO model.
But when you talk about a PMO director, I mean, do you ever see a PMO director at board level, or is it? I mean, I know it's a name, but how senior have you seen PMO directors in organisations? Have they been at that level where they could challenge and a director responsible for non-delivery or non-performance in a series of projects within their department?
So they do exist now. And it was really funny when we were writing the competence framework, we did 4 rules. We're trying to break down an understanding of kind of what PMOs do and kind of who, what competence you needed to be to work in that PMO. And so we identified an administrator, an analyst, a PMO manager, and a PMO director. And when we were writing it, apart from people saying, well, you couldn't write one for a PMO, we did. But people are saying, well, a PMO director doesn't exist. And actually at the House of PMO, we did get kind of somebody to come and talk who'd previously been head of program management in a large organisation, had gone over and become a PMO director. And he regaled the challenges he had during the interview, because he said quite bluntly at the interview, unless you are going to allow me to challenge you at board level, then don't bother employing me, because that's what my role as a PMO director is. And so actually we're seeing a proliferation now of PMO directors who are at that board level, where organisations recognise that actually they've got quite a significant portfolio, and when they compare it to business as usual, it's getting there in terms of the same value and contribution to the strategy of the organisation. And I think the other thing that we're starting to see is that those PMO directors haven't necessarily got project and program manager experience. They've got sponsorship experience. So they've seen the contribution projects can bring. They understand the benefits realization aspects, and then they use experienced method people, project delivery people to understand, kind of the various methods on how that can get done. But they can have those conversations at portfolio level and director level about actually this is, kind of the set of projects that you've chosen to do is not going to deliver what we need if you do this selection over here. And actually, Richard, you don't get your little pet project. Actually, it's a better use of the organisation's money. But again, being in a position where, well, it's actually, it's your decision to do that. But these are the facts. These are the evidence. This is what we've learned from what we've done in previous projects and in previous years, what has been successful in this organisation. So they are there. And I think that's hugely exciting.
Yeah, I think that whole thing around project prioritisation, about what we should be doing, what takes priority over this, how do you use scarce resources and what have you, is just so critical, isn't it? Otherwise, as you say, you've got a whole list of pet projects all being done with no real coordination across them, and lo and behold, you're not getting the value you're expecting. So, and that you see clearly as the PMO director sort of leading on that project prioritisation piece.
And I also think there's also another dimension to that, Richard. And going back to kind of the true definition of portfolio management, it's not just about delivering the portfolio. Portfolio management is about being able to balance the resources across projects and business as usual. So having a PMO director who understands the business can challenge, well, actually, it's not just what we're delivering from a project perspective, but actually, kind of taking it would be better perhaps to take people out of business as usual and let, kind of the business as usual kind of struggle for a little bit, because this project is absolutely more important than kind of just banging the drum, because unless we get this change through, there's going to be no business left. And I think we saw that through COVID, didn't we? Kind of, yes, we all had business as usual to do, but if we didn't set people up for remote working, there was no point in doing business as usual, because it was going to stop at the end of next week. So I think these business directors actually have a foot in business as usual and projects to do that kind of prioritization. But also they have to have a business in both those camps, because they have to recognize as the changes that are coming through from the projects and programs are going to have an impact on the shape of the organization. And so, so simple things like, well, actually, do you really want to kind of go live with a new finance system at the end of February? Well, probably not, because we've got year end at the end of March and it's the end of the tax year. So that's a really bad timing from that perspective. So having that understanding of what the projects and programs are going to deliver, the changes that are going to be involved in the organization, and the impact that has, is where that kind of PMO director sits. So you have to understand the business and you have to understand the outcomes of projects and programs.
Fascinating. Eileen, I'm sure we could continue to chat for days. I mean, it's a fascinating insight. And I have to congratulate you once again about what you and Lindsay have done for the profession of PMOs, and how you're actually really growing recognition about their importance in every organisation, because it's a challenge everybody has. And, I think at the moment it's an underutilised resource, but hopefully in time it will become
Absolutely
a standard position.
It's getting there.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you for listening. We're always keen to hear your feedback and suggestions for future episodes. You can find all the information in the show notes below. Please visit apmg-international.com to find out more about our accredited training and the certifications that support them that are related to the topics discussed in this series. I hope you've enjoyed today, and I look forward to you joining future episodes while we continue our exploration into best practice and the benefits it brings to global business. Thank you.